Like to welcome you today to a little sort of open questions presentation that I've decided to record. So the question of today came from my friend Edgar, who asked, what sort of Gnostic techniques, what sort of um, Gnostic mantras or ideas were used by ancient and classical Gnostics to maintain contact with the self, contact with the spirit, or the spirit being, as it's called in classical, much of classical Gnosticism, the authentic self. So how do we maintain contact with spirit? So, of course, first to start off, for the purpose of this talk, I'm going to talk about spirit and use the term that comes up in a lot of classical Gnosticism as the authentic self. And this is opposed to what's in much of Gnosticism as the confederate spirit or the counterfeit spirit, counterfeit spirit or the counterfeit self, which I believe can be equated with personality. You look around some of the scholars, they may put this as some sort of demonic idea, but I think this is really the counterfeit self is about our personality. And then the authentic self is about our true self, the spirit. And I'm going to try to use these terms, excuse me if I slip, but I'm going to try to use these terms throughout this presentation. And one reason for this is that it gets us out of avoiding some of the pedantic and confusing aspects of like what is meant by soul. And this is um, because the idea of soul in much of Gnosticism, there is the body, the soul, spirit. Sometimes they use the word psyche, which is kind of like soul and kind of like personality. And then, of course, modern esotericism and modern culture, we think, what is the soul? Um, is there a difference between the soul, capital S, and the human soul? How much of my soul goes from lifetime to lifetime if you believe in incarnation? So, which opens up a whole nother thing. So today I'm going to try to restrict us to being spirit, which is part of our eternal self, as opposed to our personality, the counterfeit self, which we use as personality. So this is a question that is actually interwoven through a lot of esoteric lore. Is like, how do I get in touch with my true self, my true nature, my authentic self, as opposed to just this personality? And so that is what we're going to be talking about today. So the first question is that, again, out of scope of what I'm going to do today, is about how do we know what is the authentic self? So there are various ways that we contact the authentic self and we get like a glimmer of what is the authentic self. And this glimmer, it can happen during ritual ceremonies. Sometimes when we're in the midst of a large crisis, suddenly we'll get these glimmers of, ecstasy or these moments of clear thought freedom. This happens when we're in a crisis, especially where there's a lot of karmic resolution happening. And suddenly it's like something breaks through from the heaven and there's this spark of life. And you're like, why is this happening to me now with all this other crap going on? And it's because this sort of glimmer and we're being connected with our authentic self is where we should be. It happens, sometimes this happens in times of ecstasies, as I just was mentioning about karmic lift. Some people have had experiences. And again, we're almost talking about peak experience. I mean, like really not just peak performance, experience like peak performance or being in the flow, but being really connected to it all. And sometimes this happens. People have, talk about this happening in psychedelic experiences. It also happens in 3G, which is a type of personal ceremony that happens. It happens in ascension work. And I'm planning to post something on ascension from a Gnostic perspective. Being, of course, a lot of classical Gnostic works spend a lot of time on ascension. And so the idea of how do we ascend from this state of being? How do we break out of this norm? And a lot of the classic literature actually contains a lot of visionary journeying of ascension. We can think about this as change. It's more than just changing our personal vibration, because that can be done simply by shifting your state of focus through chakras. So it's more than that. It's actually about changing where you identify. So part of this idea of contacting your authentic self is about changing, where does the I, if we think about who I am, where does the I reside? Does it reside in my head? Does it reside in my heart? Does it reside in the bigger whole? So it's a lot about moving a bit of who we are out of our puny prison of flesh that we currently live in and into the greater picture. Sometimes the ascetic self is corrected through prayer, and then also through, as I mentioned before, the ascension work, vision journeying. This even might include things such as experiences happening in shamanistic or in hypnosis or something like that, in like really strong regression situations. A person can have these experiences. Also through art. There are artists of various types have talked about this idea of breaking away. In some forms of art, such as surrealism, is all about breaking away, breaking out of that bounds of that current self into what's beyond. These are all, as you can see, this is a lot of stuff to talk about. So we're going to assume that this has already been done, that you've had like a glimmer. You've had times where like, oh yeah, I've contacted something far greater than me within myself. I've had a contact with, I think, of the authentic self. And like, how do I maintain this? How do I maintain this other state of being? That was Egger's question. So the first thing that came to mind, and when I initially thought about how do I answer this question, I thought, oh, I could put this in a message. Then I thought I could put this in a Facebook, in an email. And then it started kind of getting bigger and bigger around me. And so then I thought, oh, I'm going to do it this way. So the first thing that came to my mind, because as I said before, this question about like, how do we connect with our authentic self? This is a big question in a lot of mystical and esoteric traditions. And the first thing that came to mind is the question of how this is handled and treated and approached in monastic Christianity. And the reference here is from the Epistle of St. Paul of 1 Thessalonians, chapter 5, verse 17, but we have to put it in context. We'll say 16 to 18. And here the apostle says, rejoice always, pray continually. Give thanks in all circumstances, for this is God's will for you in Jesus Christ. So the monastic question was always, how do we pray continually? We obviously can't physically be uttering a prayer all the time, nor can we be going through, prayer beads or something all the time. There are times when we have to eat. There are times we have to sleep. There are times we have to work or do other sort of bodily function things. So we can't be utterly, continually asking a prayer. And if you've ever worked with mantras where you're giving a continual prayer all the time, after a certain point, yes, maybe you'll have some sort of out-of-body experience. Maybe you'll have something else happen, but you kind of plateau. So this isn't just about uttering a prayer continually. This is about creating a state of awareness, a state of physical presence, where one is in continual contact with God, the Godhead, through prayer. So we're talking about, how does one get to the state of mind, the state of awareness, where one is in continual contact with the divine. And this is how this relates. If you've been asking how this is going to relate to the authentic self, what's Gnostic about this? So this is how that relates. Because in this tradition, it's all about, how do we get to the state of mind of being continually in contact with the divine? Is the same question as, how do we get to the state of being where we are continually in contact with our authentic self, to the point where eventually our little personality is replaced by the bigger personality. Our current personality is replaced by the being in the state of the divine self, and we begin to act more through the divine self than our narrow personality with all its ugliness and warts. This is the same thing that happens in some of the mystical traditions. And here I'm thinking about Mariette Porat's book on the Mirror for Simple Minds. Mariette Porat was a Beguine in 13th century Beguine who wrote this book of Mirror for Simple Minds, where she talked about, how do we replace our love, small l, with the greater love? How do we replace our will with the greater will? How do we replace our wisdom, small w, with the greater wisdom? And of course, she also talked about how we replace our church, small c, with the greater church, small c, which got her condemned by the Roman Catholic Church and eventually burned as a heretic. But her book was so powerful that despite its banishment, it was maintained through centuries of under the threat of excommunication, was maintained for centuries in Franciscan monasteries until the ban was lifted sometime in the 16th century. But it's available today. It's in the resource section at the end of this presentation. So she talked to. So this has been a tradition in all monastic work to some degree or another, regardless of the type. of religion. And here, of course, we're going to be talking mostly Western stuff because that's what I know. So, as I said, this is a problem of how do we maintain that state of prayer? How do we maintain that connection with the divine, the connection with our authentic self all the time? And there's a great classical work on this, besides, Marguerite has just mentioned. It's called the Philokalia. And the Philokalia is a Greek Orthodox work that is thought to date from the 4th to the 5th century. And is part of the Hayakaist tradition. And Hayakaist simply means a tradition of seeking continual oneness with God, oneness with the Jesus prayer, or we can think of it as oneness with God. And the Philokalia is largely about technique. And this is why it's really can be really helpful for the Gnostic or for the mystical tradition. You can find versions of this in audio, so you can play it in the background and just kind of let it go. The fact that it's from the 4th, it's very early, from the 4th to 5th century, and from the Greek, hieroclast tradition is rather interesting, because there's some scholarship that would suggest that the end of the mystery schools, when they were banned by the Roman Empire, in the Roman Empire, banned by the Christian Roman emperors, that the Platonic mystery schools found a place of being within the mystical traditions of the Greek, Orthodox Hayakaist traditions. And then some of these traditions here are really a continuation of what existed in the theurgy of Iamblichus, Plotinus, and the late Platonic philosophers and Platonic theurgists. And if you study theurgy and Platonism, you'll start seeing very close, movement, very close identification with Gnosticism. In fact, it's really hard to read a lot of classical Gnostic texts without knowing something about Platonism. And if you've read something about Platonism, another thing is that it's all about the one. So you can see the one and the goodness, and so you can see how you can kind of camouflage and embed a lot of that flavor of things within this sort of Orthodox tradition here. So anyway, the Philokalia is largely technique, again, as I said before, and techniques about creating prayer as a state of being. In this, it talks about maintaining attentiveness, which is really about maintaining your state of consciousness so that you are where you are at any state of time. And you're only doing one thing, being in one place at a time. So some of the techniques here are really reminiscent of Zen or Ram Dass's be here now moment. But they're traditions to really train the mind. And part of doing the ascension techniques, part of doing journeying, part of getting what you want to get out of any esoteric tradition, out of any ceremony, any ritual you're involved with, is partly about being only in one place at one time. So this is all about controlling the monkey brain. This is all about controlling whether or not you're going to choose to worry or wonder about planning things ahead, or wonder about this or that aspect of relationship. None of that stuff. None of that stuff. It's all about being in one place at one time, being aware of where your mind is. Then once you are aware of where your mind is, then you can say, answer the question, where do I exist? Do I exist beyond where I am physically sitting now? Am I in a greater world? And then am I at a higher plane looking down through this avatar puppet of mine, who is still encased in human form doing this work? And then that comes to other cities, such as projecting yourself, etc. But it's about getting yourself in one place at one time, and that. Then, once you are there, and once you can do that, then you can start thinking about what is the state of mind where I keep my mind? What do I want the state of mind to be in? So as you're in this sort of state of oneness, and you are in control, whether you choose to worry about things or whether you not to, probably not to, because it's more fun not to, but to keep yourself in this mind, then you can get there. It's almost like a hypnotic suggestion. If you go through hypnosis, you treat yourself with trigger points. In fact, one can even do this now and think about my hand mudras that way. That I'd recently been looking at a book, Coptic Christianity, and in there they had an image of Jesus Christ doing this mudra of connecting the thumb with the fourth ring finger. And they said that this mudra in the book, this was connecting the self with the divine nature. So one can almost think about, so in hypnotism, if you're going to change behavior, one of the things you do is to create this a trigger. Usually often it's like a hand thing, but a trigger that says, okay, I'm going back to that state. So we could think of one could almost use a mudra like that. It's like, okay, I'm going to the place of calm, going to a place of connection. I'm going to maintain this connection. And once you do this sort of thing over time, and this is where it begins to become almost like neurolinguistic programming, like the old people used to talk about mind over matter, that you can put your mind in that mindset. You're in control. You're in control of what you're experiencing and where your I is located. All this sounds really simplistic. And it can take, some of the techniques are used. You can read all about, find things about, get a copy of the Philokalia, listen to that, go find a local Zen school, practice with that. But it's a lot about getting yourself into being able to stay in a point of oneness. And once you're in that one-pointed state, you can also take yourself to a state where you've experienced a level of spiritual highness and spiritual peace. And these are one of those things. It's like the title of Marguerite Porret's book, Mirror of Simple Souls. It seems like it's very straightforward, very simple, but it's very hard to do. It's like any of us who have worked on emotional control, very hard to do, but it puts you in control. Another technique, and this kind of follows on from this previous one we talked about attention mindedness, is the cultivation of the idea of the indwelling Christ. In modern Gnosticism, we see Christ as teacher. And as I'm going to go on into the next section after this, Christ as basically a higher self. Now, I'm not talking about higher self in terms of like New Age stuff, but a real sort of higher angelic, higher being self. But as Jesus is a teacher, in that part of cultivating that can be cultivating these ideas too. So this happens in two diverse ways. On one hand, this is all about the indwelling Christ, hence our first picture here. The idea that Christ is within us. And as it says in the Gospel of Thomas, Christ is within us and Christ is without us. And it's this all around sort of, almost pantheistic sort of way. But to cultivate the idea through meditation and inner being of the Christ within. And it's good, if you do this, it's good to think of the Christ within as being in the heart center. So then you avoid issues of cleavage and other things that can happen if you work on higher chakras, exclusively. But to think of Christ in the heart, and that this Christ in the heart then the indwelling Christ, and recognize that within you exists a Christ spirit looking to come up, looking to manifest itself in the world to make a better world. And so these are the idea of Christ as teacher, Christ as guide. And the idea of the indwelling Christ, if you're very somatic related, can be very, very good because it puts your concentration on the heart self itself. And think of that as your own in your being. And the focus on the indwelling Christ, that this is a Christ, an energy that wants to come out from you, helps you maintain both that connection with the self, but it also connects you with the life force, and it connects you via the heart with other people and energy. And it has an effect of shedding light, helping light on the world. And this is why so many of the icons, often they have like a baby in the center of the heart, the baby Jesus in the center of the heart of Mary. And the Christ is often depicted as a child because we have a natural tendency, unless we're a sociopath, we have a natural tendency to love babies and to keep them close. So even in the stories of saints, when Christ has appeared to people, sometimes they say he appears as a little baby so that we can hold it close. This gets to an idea of kind of the child within and nurturing our own self, or nurturing that seed of divinity within ourselves. Another way to put it. Now, as for Gospel of Thomas says, I'm going to make the inside outside. Another way to kind of cultivate this sort of feeling extension with the authentic self is to work with the ideas of around the cosmic or the etheric Christ. That and in these disciplines, it's about as we breathe in, know that we are breathing in energy of the cosmic, the etheric Christ. We are breathing in what the Manichaeans called energy of the living Jesus, that sort of light force of the divine. And there's a book called Cognitive Yoga by Yeshua Ben Aaron, who's written this whole thing on the idea, this whole book on cultivating the idea of the etheric Christ. And the etheric Christ is really what Rudolf Steiner called the cosmic Christ. And if you are, and this is something, find easier to do if you're in the right environment, especially if you're out in nature, to bringing in this idea of the etheric Christ. If you're in the midst of a city, sometimes it can be a hard go to find this sort of thing of seeing Christ energy all around you when you're just stuck in with the hustle and bustle of it all. But these are two other options that are very classical. And they're also very classical in the Western esoteric tradition, and also very classical in this idea of the divinity being all around us, but also the divinity being a seed, that the seed of divinity exists within ourselves as well. Now, the final major idea I want to talk about here, and this is a kind of an exclusively Gnostic idea for contacting and maintaining contact with the higher self, and this is that of the heavenly twin. And being one with the heavenly twin and our relationship with the heavenly twin is something that is a major component of Gnosticism, both in the school of Thomas and in the Manichaeanism and the Manichaeans. The whole Manichaean religion starts with Mani, and Mani's journey into becoming a prophet begins when he is visited by his heavenly twin. And the heavenly twin visits Mani, tells him to form a universal religion, and that's what he starts doing by teaching people how to ascend in this world, and by incorporating the different cultures and ideas that are around him. The School of Thomas includes books that are left to us, such as the Gospel of Thomas, Thomas the Contender, the Poems of Thomas, the Acts of Thomas. And so Thomas is the apostle. If you've been to, you may know from the New Testament, Thomas is referred to in the New Testament as a twin. And of course, every Sunday school teacher class that this comes up where they talk about Thomas being the twin, kids want to know, well, whose twin is he? In non-canonical and mystical sections of Christianity and Gnosticism, Thomas is the earthly twin of Jesus. So Jesus is the divine self. Thomas is an earthly self. So Thomas is Jesus' twin. And of course, as we are to read the Thomas literature, the Acts, the Gospels, whatever, these are all written so that we are Thomas. So that Jesus is our twin. He is our heavenly twin. He is our heavenly twin that is there to instruct us, is there to help us, is there to lift us up. So the Jesus Christ is the twin of Thomas, and of course, and we are to read this as we are Thomas. So, and this is something in the books, in the Acts of Thomas, this is kind of detailed out, which are kind of humorous to read, because Jesus gets Thomas into a lot of trouble because people assume that, for example, at one point, Jesus convinces this newlywed couple that they should become celibate and they should become Christians and celibate. And then, so then the next morning, after the young couple, newlywed couple announces that they're celibate, to their parents, are really irate because they're looking forward to children and progeny. They go and they put Thomas in jail. Even though it was Jesus who did this, Thomas looks just like Jesus. They haven't seen Jesus, they just seen Thomas. Thomas goes into jail. So, but that aside, so the question is how do we work with this heavenly twin? How should we incorporate this? Well, example of this is really, we can see this a little bit, is actually described, that we can infer from ideas such as this in the book of Thomas the Contender. And the Savior said, "Brother Thomas, while you have time in this world, listen to me, and I'll reveal to you the things you have pondered in your mind. Now, since it has been said that you are my twin and my true companion, you should see, Jesus telling this to you. Your heavenly twin tells you to do this. Examine yourself, learn who you are. See what we talked about in the previous things about awareness. And in what way you exist and how you come to be. And since you are called my brother, it's not fitting that you to be ignorant of yourself. Know thyself. And I know that you have understood because, and this is when it gets into key points of working with the heavenly twin. Because I know that you have understood, because you have already understood that I am the knowledge of the truth. So there's this element of working with the divine twin, that the divine twin on an evolutionary area is like our future self. The divine twin is our self who has already ascended out of this plane of existence into the divine. And so we can think of it as a heavenly twin, as representing that aspect of the authentic self that as humans we are only conscious, our consciousness can only maintain that much. And that is already there with the heavenly self. It's as if you're playing one of these mind games where you're looking back and saying, what would I tell my 12-year-old self? If I had to go back to be 12-year-old, what would I tell myself, 12-year-old self, to help them through? What would I tell my, frightened 6-year-old self to help them through? This is the relationship with the heavenly self, the divine heavenly twin, the divine self. It is what our future evolution would be. So I know that you understood, because you have already understood that I am there. So while you accompany me, although you are uncomprehending, you have in fact already come to know, and you will become the one who knows himself. So this is a predestined thing. If we believe in spiritual evolution, and we do believe in the ascent of the spirit, it's a predestined thing that we will be at that level of our heavenly twin. It's a matter of when we can move our consciousness to eternally exist at that state. And at that state, of course, the whole body consciousness will move on, whether it's at the end or we become transformed into some bodhisattva, who knows? But we already are destined to be at this state. And again, we go back to the awareness. For he who has not known himself has known nothing. But he who has known himself and at the same time already achieved knowledge about the depth of all. So once we gain knowledge, and once we really know ourselves, we achieve knowledge about the depth of all. This is kind of similar, going back, I mentioned Rudolf Steiner before. Rudolf Steiner, in his reading of Akashic records, really also talks about the Akashic records being available through the ethers. And that if we can completely put ourselves in the space of the cosmos of cosmic Christ and embrace that, we can know knowledge. And he finally finishes, so you, my brother, have beheld what is obscure to men, and that what they ignorantly stumble against. So self-knowledge, and then knowledge that we are predestined for this higher self. And this gets into part of the idea of Christianity that gets so, so confused in many modern Christian mind, is that, that when one knows oneself, one knows and recognizes that we are predestined to be at this higher level. And once we can achieve there, it is a free. This is why it says in Ephesians, I think it's Ephesians, that man, a Christian, does not sin. And that is because when you are at that higher consciousness level where you are attuned to the authentic self, what you do is reflected through the authentic self, and what you do is good. And so you do not sin because you are taking and doing your actions from the divine. Not thy will, but not my will, but thy will be done. From the divine. So what you do in your own intuition, that is only good. So how do we know the heavenly twin then? One of the theories that comes across within Gnosticism a bit, and then we talked about this when we studied the prayer of Paul the Apostle, is the evolved human eventually we join our divine twin, we join the ranks of human. That's why the prayer is, you'd see those things that angels have not seen, ears of the archons have not heard, and what has yet to be revealed in the hearts of humans who become angels. So the scriptures, the Old Testament, non-canonical work, the rabbinical Jewish work, tells us about patriarchs and saints such as Jacob, Enoch, Hermas, and other, who have joined the ranks of Israel, joined the ranks of angels. That's why, if you remember this artwork here, this is of Blake, but it's of how Jacob sleeps. And as he sleeps in this famous dream, he sees a vision of angels ascending and descending from the stairs. And this is often seen as a sort of evolutionary rite of ourselves becoming more and more pure as we go up through levels of the ranks. And it's in the course of this dream and the battling of the angels that Jacob is given the name Israel, and with L, such as Oriel, Michael, Raphael. All the angels have that L at the end of their names. So this is part of Jacob having become an angel at the time. The works of Enoch. Enoch is taken up into heaven, and he becomes first described to God, then he becomes an angel. Similar thing, Hermas is seeing the angels. So part of this becoming the angels is this ascent, spiritual ascent, spiritual evolution, where you become your future angelic self. So and add that the closer you become to your angelic self, that is essentially your authentic self, as much as we could understand the authentic self for a while we're in human form, as closer we become to that, the more we connect with the self. And now some people will talk about the heavenly twin as being the same as the guardian angel, or as the holy guardian angel that we get in the Goetia and ceremonial magic. I don't know. I don't know if that's true or not. I actually find it really helpful to think of them as being separate things. It says in many scriptures that we got lots of angels around us. So I'm not necessarily really concerned whether I see the heavenly twin as being something different than maybe our guardian angel, because it said that everybody has a guardian angel. There's something within the Greek lore as being the personal daemon. Again, something that gets equated with this, I'm not sure. But so I see these as being separate things. So I see the heavenly twin as being kind of this sort, I like this idea of different steps, different rungs of the ladder above and below. And I see the heavenly twin as being on that next level of rung of the ladder above me, who reaches down and I reach up to pull me up the level. And I often see, might see, there's a heavenly twin kind of just above me, about 6-7 feet. And it's a visualization, it's a connection. Now, the question is people, if you think you're getting communication through the heavenly twin, how do you know? And this gets into the idea of discerning spirits, etc. And one thing, the simple rule I'm going to give right now is that from everything, the heavenly twin is good. Nonstop. Platonic idea of good. So if you think you're in contact with the heavenly twin and you're getting something that may, hurt yourself or hurt someone else or cause pain or suffering, I would be really doubtful if that is a heavenly twin. It's probably your higher self. It's your own state of consciousness pretending to be something more. Because from everything I have seen and read, our heavenly twin is good. And is all about what is doing good for us, good for bad. Now, that's not to say the heavenly twin, if you're making a difficult choice, that is the right choice, but some people are going to be unhappy with it. The heavenly twin may be there to kind of have your back or to give you comfort to do what is right. But it's still about doing what's right. So there's other places you can look at testing spirits and then getting out, but I give the general, so what is good? What is good? What is about love? What is about positiveness? What is about strength? What is about health? Is good. Nonstop. Because as he said, we said. Another way of working with the heavenly twin, and this artwork here is from a wonderful book, modern book. Again, okay. Some of the things I've given today are from classical Gnostic literature. Some are from mystical esoteric Christianity. Some things are modern. And that's because as a practicing Gnostic, I am willing and open to get whatever sort of knowledge for ascent, knowledge to improve myself, knowledge to evolve from wherever it is. And I think one of the real benefits from our time is that we've got access to all these different traditions, and we can use that knowledge from our diverse modern traditions and look at what maybe is there in the classical Gnostic literature and say, how is this used? So we can look in there and we can see, oh yeah, there's nothing here but a skeleton of steps. Oh, this is a guided meditation. Oh, this is a mantra. This is from there. And also, we should not, there's no reason I can think of to hesitate not to use what other people have developed. So this image is out of a book by, Mary Claire Prophet, called The Science of this Spoken World. And the prophet and the Mary Claire Prophet, they're from what's often referred to as the I Am movement. Now, the I Am, the idea of I Am goes back to the Sanskrit version of I Am, which I think is Sat, but I haven't looked it up, so I shouldn't be talking about it now. But I Am is kind of a short-term meditation used in modern esoteric Christian groups. And it's also used in a lot of invocations and evocations. And part of it goes back to Isaiah, where where God is looking for a prophet, and he's talking about how he needs somebody to do this and that, and Isaiah says, here I am, send me, I am. Also, it goes back to Moses. Moses is in the wilderness in almost like what we call a vision quest. And there's suddenly this burning bush, and it's Jehovah speaking to him. And he asks him because he recognizes this as a deity. He says, who are you? And the voice is, I am that I am. So I am is a form of invocation. Now you can use, of course, I am in a number of words. You can use it in affirmations. We all know it from affirmations. I am good, I'm strong, blah, blah, blah. Okay. I am. And it's used a lot. So the school of Mary Claire and her husband, and Mark was her name, Prophet, in their school, the I Am school, is part of this I Am movement that actually predates them, going back to the early 20th century. Uses this in a lot of the invocations. And this is part of the invocation for the what they call the seventh ray, which is the ray of integration. And this is an image from their mantra, which is, of course, very simply, I am a being of violet fire. I am the purity that God desires. I am a being of violet fire. I am the purity that God desires. I am a being of violet fire. I am the purity that God desires. And in this very simple mantra is something that we can see lift ourselves up into the image of our heavenly twin and into a further image of our completely authentic self. This is a wonderful, and I copy this because I love this imagery, because it's very simple. Again, maybe this is back to my point where I said I like to have my heavenly twin about 5, about 6 feet above me or something. But it's a very easy visualization that one can use with a mantra in and incorporate into whatever sort of religious practice one does. And it lifts you up. And then once you do this for a while, it can take you into higher states of being. And this, so I recommend this book. It has a lot of invocations. There may not be through everybody's taste. A lot of this is through ascended work and that one might like or not like, but it's a good point. And I think I may have, so I've copied a version of this here. And I'm looking at deciding whether or not I really wanted to do that, but it's here. So let's just kind of go with this. So they're sort of invocations. I have found some of the invocations to be very life affirming, very life changing. And this actually happens to be my favorite one of again, we're at I am the immortal flame of cosmic being. And demand all energy submit to the outer and to submit to the great God flame within my heart. And we're talking about inner Christ. Demand that all conditions come under a great effective God control, recognize the etheric Christ. And I demand that all is not of light be transmuted and changed into the fullness of all which I already am. Again, we get the I am. I am the full perfection of God. This echoes our higher self. I am the living flame of cosmic freedom, liberation. I am the buoyant dancing joy of God that passes through the 4 lower bodies and ascends into the presence, in heart of my presence to give me my freedom now. Again, we talk about transformation here now. I am the raising power of the spirit of light and fire, which lifts me to the victory of my ascension as the full gathered victory of the saints and ascended beings of all ages, to ascend back to the very heart of God, the immortal consciousness of. And that's supposed to be repeated 3 times. And then we end it in full faith. I consciously accept this manifest, something we all learned from any sort of time working with pagan or magical groups. Right here now, fully power sustain, all powerful, ever expanding the world, fully until all are fully ascended, light and be. Beloved, I am. Beloved, I am. Beloved, I am. And I include this here too, that there are little in unexpected places. There are other little things that can help us on kind of our quest to be united with our full original self. And one could even take maybe the format of this and transfer it into something more classical, Gnostic or not. And so I hope this has given you some hope and some awareness around around the idea of the spiritual self and how about maintaining connection with the authentic self. Maybe some little processes that you can have or procedures. And so let me know if this has been helpful. And and you can find us. Oh, let me see. I think I put this. Maybe let me hold on for a minute. I need to check whether or not I have a final page here or not. I did. Okay, sorry. So help me know if this has been helpful. You can find the Treasury of Light Gnostic Church on Facebook. currently, we're our church is a loose group of people distributed throughout the United Kingdom, but we're also we are part of Ecclesiastic Apostolic in the United States, and you can find their website on apostolicgnosis.org. And at some point I'll put this up. So I hope that it's been helpful. And if so, I will just say goodbye. And this has been Right Reverend Pamela Joy Giese, Treasury of Light Gnostic Church. And may you ascend, and may you have blessings the rest of the day. Amen.